Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show that we designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week for now over 2 years with Craig Brown, an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hello, Craig.
Hey, Thom. It's good to hear your voice. Looking forward to today's talk. We're going to talk a little bit different this time. We're going to talk about how to make stuff from the very beginning.
Ooh, I like that. I like making stuff from the beginning. I like that. I like innovation. I like products. So every single week, Craig and I try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help all the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today is going to be one of those days, as they all are, because we have Kevin Mako. And Kevin is the founder and president of MAKO Design and Invent. Now, what he is he's known as the Invention Guy. That's kind of a cool nickname. I like that. He is a lifelong entrepreneur who has essentially done this exact same business for over 20 years, which he actually started when he was in high school. And what he does is product development for hardware startups. So, Kevin, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thom, love the lively intro. Craig, happy to be on the show with you two guys.
So, Kevin, give us a little bit about your background. I mean, I said you started this in high school. That's kind of unique. So why don't you tell us how you got into what you're doing?
Yeah, MAKO Design, it's a bit of a unique business in a couple of ways. First of all, I started in high school, just off an idea, but like a lot of our inventors have, they see a pain point and they want to solve it. Of course, I was, young and clueless and just had this dream at the time. I incorporated it while I was in university. I went to Harvard Business School, sister school, the Ivey Business School. I was section class president there, and then went on to Hong Kong University to do supply chain management, all the while building up this thing so that when I graduated in 2007, I went full-time into this and nothing else since then. And the business model that I started then, the second thing that makes this unique is that I never pivoted. This exact same business model, doing global caliber product development, but tailored to early stage hardware, physical product development, startups, companies, inventors, et cetera. It's the same model that I ideated back in high school. Is the same thing I'm doing every day today.
So Kevin, welcome to the show. Hey, so now I'm even more intrigued. So what's the best way to start? I got this idea. I came from a really big company, and now I'm on my own. How do I get started? Do I just call you? Is that the answer? Or give me some clues here. What's the best way to get started?
Yeah, there's a lot that you can do before calling me. I mean, first and foremost, hardware and software are merging, right? The biggest thing to think about here is like we're going through a massive, essentially redesign of everything that you touch. Like look around your room right now, everything you touch and feel in the next 20 to 30 years, whether you love it or hate it, it's all getting redeveloped. And it's almost certainly going to have a microchip in it in some way or another. Right. So this is where we're getting the physical world and the software
that
world.
Assumes, of course, you can get a chip, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, that's another topic.
That's a short-term problem.
That's right. They'll figure it out and be back stronger than ever, I'm sure. But look, the big thing is everything's getting redesigned. This is almost like the industrial revolution of the digital era where, if you look 20 or 30 years ago, software was everything. Hardware wasn't touched from, big investors, venture capital, et cetera. And then, you're looking over the last 10, 15 years, and especially nowadays, hardware is think of something like the Peloton bike, right? Look at the IPO value, look at the value of that company. That's hardware and software combined together. And so it's an incredible opportunity for those folks with an idea. So coming back around to your question, first thing that you can do is just do your research and sketch it out. And that's assuming, whether you're a big company, you're part of a big company, or whether you're just a regular person with an invention idea, you should go through this similar process. Obviously, just take a look around at a pain point that you see in your life. The more you understand the industry or the arena in which that pain point exists, the better idea that you're going to come up with.
Okay,
After you come up with, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no. So we've touched on market research a little bit in these podcasts, and did you know intuitively how to do that, or is that something you picked up along the way in the education? Because I think, especially engineers, problem solvers, they solve problems, but they're not particularly good at market research. Like, is this a problem everybody has, or is this a problem just I have, right? So
I'll tell you, most of our clients aren't engineers. Most of our clients are people who have come up with just a better way of doing it. And again, whether it was at the corporate level or the startup, most of our clients are early stage, right?
So then the advice is don't be an engineer. Okay, I like that. We're already encumbered with other constraints.
You know what, though? I love working with fellow engineers. It definitely, engineers are brilliant people. We have a whole team of them that work for us, right? So it's an amazing thing.
Sure, but I think we at least I undervalued market research. I maybe it's an arrogance of sorts where you just think, well, I know it's a good thing, so certainly everybody else will, right? So I was hoping, help me out. I don't know when you said do better research, how do I do that?
Well, so again, the easiest thing you can do on your own, and we're talking very early ideation stage here, you come up with that aha moment, or it's been sitting in your mind for a long time, which again is quite common. You say, okay, I think I want to do something about this. First things first, obviously, Google the heck out of it. Second things, sketch it out. Just conceptualize it. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or not. Ideate the product, put the vision to paper. And then the third thing that I would advise when you're doing this exercise is to focus on your simplest version, but high quality, but simple version of the product. So when you're thinking about all the bells and whistles and features and stuff that this might have, scrap most of them and focus on the core thing. What was that original pain point that you look to solve? It doesn't need to first connect with an app and have LEDs and be Bluetooth enabled and all this sort of stuff. Start with the actual core problem and then really identify, well, what do you visualize as the best way to solve that problem? Right. Yeah, and this is early before we can talk into more advanced now what do you do to actually test and market validate? That's a whole another conversation we get into, but you would be surprised at how many inventors and ideators don't go through this very simple exercise of thinking of a simple product, doing their Google research and just sketching it onto a piece of paper. Right?
Yeah. The process of sketching it, sorry for the noise. The process of sketching it is it helps the human mind get your head around it even more, right? There's been interesting books in the past few years about how our minds work, thinking fast and when we got lots of adrenaline, and then thinking slow when we reconsider things and let our mind work on it in the background, if you will. And the sketching process helps that background process quite a lot, and you'll end up with a better idea. I like your other point about keep it simple, stupid. I mean, we're all taught this in early in engineering schools. Quit making it elaborate. Make it simple. Make sure you're really focused on the task at hand. So, yeah. Okay. So are there tools that help this? Computer-based tools? Is there a tool you just got to have in order to make this work?
Well, this is where it gets very interesting. And this is why, if you look at right now, for people in the hardware space, it's easier, better, more efficient than ever to not only to develop a product, but also to test that product, which leads me to what you were talking about before. How do you truly do your market research? Okay. Back in the day when you dealt with hardware, basically you hire massive engineering teams. They come up with these ideas. Maybe you do consumer groups and research and all this sort of crazy stuff. Costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Before you even got to production, you tool this thing up, which again is hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, where you cut actual steel to create these products. Then you go to market and you hope that it works well. And that tool life expectancy can be anywhere from 5 to 20 years. That whatever you made, you better hope works. All of that's changing because of software and additive manufacturing today.
Oh yeah. Right.
So in terms of tools of the trade, first and foremost, obviously 3D CAD software has been around for a long time, but has evolved to the point where we can get so sophisticated just in the ideation phase. And this is stuff we do with clients constantly, just in the underlying mechanical engineering, electronic engineering, and visual design, which is your industrial design, putting those three together in cohesive, comprehensive software packages, then running simulations, running visualizations, all this sort of stuff. And every month we have new tools available.
So did you see this as you were a high schooler, or did you stumble into it or discover it along the way that you can do this all virtually? You're right. Everything you described is absolutely, and a lot of us in the society, we get this. This is where we came from, right? But how did you discover it? I'm thinking the startup guy who maybe hasn't had that background didn't even realize it was out there. I meat maybe they've read an article about additive manufacturing, but they don't really know what it means, that they could actually buy one for a couple $1,000s, right? It's not very expensive, at least the small ones, right?
Well, and two things here. One thing about how I kind of visualized the future of development in the early years, especially, when I was coming into this full time, but also, what that means for startups. So on the first hand, for me, the digital software tools are already out. 15, 20 years ago. They're in their infancy. They had minimal, they're very powerful with what they did, but they didn't nearly have kind of the simulation or value. But of course, we knew that was coming. That also affects additive manufacturing. Think of the printer, right? Originally had that dot matrix printer, and then you saw it evolve over time. And now, you can have one in your home and print off something for a penny, right? So the exact same growth of 3D manufacturing is happening just like it did with the printer. They're becoming more efficient, better resolution, different and unique materials, better quality materials, and they're becoming exponentially cheaper and faster to operate. So what's really happening, especially right now, we look at 2021, we've got this wicked CAD software, which is incredibly powerful in terms of what you're able to do with it, especially if you're very good at using it, in combination with additive manufacturing. So we can actually start physically testing these things. You mentioned a little bit earlier, well, software is great because you can do all this that you didn't do. Well, hardware, there's still always that physical presence. There's still always that testing and refinements that's needed in the real world. So now, like never before, not only can you now build and test and refine and tweak and get things right ready for production, but you can also do that at a fraction of the cost and with much greater quality than you ever could before. So going back to myself, the big thing that I saw up and coming, which was what no other design firm in the industry, in fact, every design firm owner that I talked to back when I was starting this business told me, don't deal with startups, don't deal with small manufacturers. You just use those as stepping stones to pay the bills, and then you get your big Fortune 500 revolving customers, right?
Yes, right.
And I knew right then that was the opportunity, because I knew that the technology was improving to help startups in early stage and even small established manufacturers get new stuff out. And there is no company to help support those folks. They needed a company like us. And that's what we pioneered, was how do you find somebody that does world-class development, but tailored to the small folks? We could only do that by becoming experts at the tools, especially the software tools of the trade that allow us to then push into additive, that allow us then to get into short run or short production manufacturing, to then test market that product to either improve the product, stop the product, or change the product.
So, Kevin, this is fascinating. We used to think about guys like you might exist. I'm talking about 5-10 years ago. And it was, you sat in a big car company and you said, well, where are our risks? And we talked about the obvious competitors. And then somebody in the back of the room would always bring up, well, when additive gets here, all of a sudden there'll be a 20-person company that can, knock our socks off in a particular segment of the market. Look at the number of electric vehicle companies that have sprouted across the world, right? And part of it's what happens in a new market. But another part of it is, that first vehicle, the one that you demo to see what the market would respond will be, it's actually a lot easier to make these days, right? Than back in the good old days where you still had to tool a plant to make the first sample, right? So it's interesting how fast it's changing. And I'm glad you picked on this, because I think the maker revolution, the ability to be able to print a part, or print a device, do a little bit of work on it, and then hand it to a consumer and say, is this it? Is this what you meant? And am I doing it? Or what else am I missing, right? And I think, especially ergonomics, it'll be so much better. It'll be so much faster to address ergonomic things, especially for people that aren't the norm. And well, I mean by that is maybe it's a handicap or maybe it's some other thing about the way they interact with the physical world that you as a startup can actually address very quickly. And it's because of additive. So,
well, and that's a whole nother segment is your customized manufacturing, which is impossible as tooling. So you've got case scenarios maybe for small brackets of folks, right? 100, 200, 300 person runs, something we're doing too. And again, additive is only one piece of the puzzle here, but something that's incredible with additive, even just for your test marketing, is you can actually build that into your design process to say, we're not going to go, when we're going to go to market, we're not just going to, go with this thing that we think is going to be the holy grail. We're going to go with that, let's call it minimum viable product version, that first version, with the understanding that every time we do a production run, we're going to take feedback from our customers, real paying customers who are using the product, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to get rid of the ugly. We're going to fix the bad, and we're going to improve on the good. And then we're going to make our next version. And we're going to keep doing this. So now if you're looking at life cycles of months as opposed to years.
Yeah, and of course that
revision, right?
The good, bad, and ugly depends on who you ask, right?
Absolutely.
Some people's ugly is just a bad to the other people. So in some cases, and this is the essence of market research, is being able, if your development cycle is 4 years, typical of a car company, then you're trying to predict 4 years out what people will want. Well, with the pandemic at our hand, nobody predicted that, right? So if you could shorten that development cycle to a few months, right, then all of a sudden you could be much more sensitive to market changes or market variation from different regions. I mean, different people interact with products in different ways. So it's a little, it's necessary to make money, but it's a little foolhardy to think you could build 100,000 of one thing and everybody would like it, right? Instead, and then you take all your money and you put it in the advertising budget and you sponsor a sporting event so people buy your truck when you win the race on the weekend. I'm talking about NASCAR, everybody. But anyways, so what are your best tips then for a successful entrepreneur? I mean, things like, it's your product idea and you're innovating it and your ideas have helped, but what if I just got it wrong? I mean, what other tips do you have for innovators to make sure they remain entrepreneurs?
Well, you've already hinted, and we've somewhat already flirted around this concept, but it's iterative feedback, iterative design, and constant feedback. And that's where, again, you try to go to market relatively quickly. You get some real feedback from users, and then you improve upon that. That is an incredibly powerful tool to early stage entrepreneurs, especially, to try and really pin down what their best product's going to be, or even just learn what accessory or add-on products are going to be. There's a couple other big tips that I'd throw in there as well.
So let me help the audience for a second. So what you just described, the software guys would call the Agile Manifesto.
Absolutely, it's coming to hardware.
So it's kind of cool. So we thought about this a few weeks ago. We said, hey, shouldn't Agile be influencing hardware? And here we go. Kevin already knows the answer. We just need to listen to him. Okay. So you said there were some other tips.
Well, a couple big ones. First and foremost, especially if you're if you just got a product idea, or you're new into the innovation space with hardware, just spend a little bit of time at it every single day. That's one of those things where I would argue 10 to 20% of people do it. And yet that is the difference almost among all other things. That's the difference from I've worked with over 1,000 hardware startups in my career. And I can tell you that over money, skill, even a great idea, the number one thing that leads to success is the people who just put in a little bit of continual effort every single day.
So it's practice. It's like everything. You just practice, absolutely. You get better. Okay.
And when it becomes more viable, that don't quit your day job right out of the gate. When it becomes more and more viable, then you may decide to make that change. But the key is there's no excuse not to spend a little bit of time at, you got one or two life-changing ideas, especially in the hardware space, in your whole life. So if you've been blessed enough to have that idea, then just spend a little bit of time on that idea every day, because this is something that literally could revolutionize your future. So you at least give it the credit to push it to that level. And then, of course, some of the things that we talked about in terms of getting customer feedback and all that stuff you can do quite early. And to add to that, this is a big tip, I would say, for my third tip there, is really ensure that you're maximizing the tools of the trade to actually test your market. One of the big ones today is crowdfunding. So that's Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and generally I would recommend doing it through a crowdfunding agency who knows what they're doing. This is a beautiful thing where you can actually, even before you go into either additive or traditional manufacturing for your product, you can test it to the real world. Get people, early adopters who love what you're doing, to actually prepay for units of your product when you're able to deliver down the road. This is where you can have feedback without having to actually pay for the production run, which you can either decide to tweak and refine in your production run, or you can decide at a later, when you do that first production run, you're going to use some of that feedback to create your version 2.0 or whatnot down the road. So again, the tools of today are incredible. We've talked about the actual tools to develop the product, but don't forget about the tools to actually test, market, and even sell the product down the road. It's easier than ever today to get something to market. But again, back to the work ethic thing is a little bit of time every day.
Interesting. Well, this is insightful. So how about pitfalls? Are there a couple pitfalls along the way that you'd say, hey, avoid this? I could imagine there are. So tell us your negative lessons here for a second.
Number one is feature creep.
Of course, because we're engineers.
Killer to hardware. So think about it in software, right? Software and hardware, like we mentioned, so much of that is merged together. And you're even mentioning how agile now can apply to the hardware world. Well, it goes both directions. Feature creep in software is tough, but it can be fixed with code. Feature creep in hardware may mean a product simply does not work. And once you are in production, you can't flip the switch. Once those units are in those customers' hands, you cannot release just an app update to fix it. So you have to be almost in hardware. You almost have to double down on the principles of software and be very careful with not providing too many things to too many people. The beautiful thing too is with hardware, right? Like software, it's a global marketplace. So many people are concerned about having too small of a market. And I would challenge you. I would challenge anybody. If you believe you have a tiny, tiny market, I would challenge you to think whether you truly believe you can saturate that tiny piece of the market worldwide. I can assure you that you won't be able to do that, which means you can now target that specific customer base really aggressively, solve exactly that one customer type's pain point, hit them hard, and then go global with it. Spend years capturing all those people who either must have that because it's such a specific pain point that you're solving, and to those people who are either, maybe wealthy buyers as well that just might have it. Once you've saturated that market, then start thinking about, okay, now with all the feedback I've generated, how can I improve the product and maybe expand to another market? And I can assure you, you'll be much better suited to figure out what that bigger market is at that time.
So I get where you're going. And, a lot of what we talk about with modern digital tools is how connected we all are, even what we are doing right now with the Zoom recording, right? And I think people way underestimate the power of being connected. And so to your point, you know what you know, which might be regional, it might be people you knew from school, and then they might be diverse across different regions, but it's still a small sample of the world. The fact that the world can quickly find you, whatever search engine you use, the fact that you get a few endorsements, and then before you know it, everybody wants to find out, who is this Kevin guy?
That's right. Everybody within that little vertical, right? They could quickly. Right? So
connectedness is one of those opportunities. It's here. It already exists. And so learning how to navigate that. I mean, I struggle. I am surprised at the way it's connected to other things. And I don't know what to do with that. Well, what I'm hearing you say, Kevin, is, well, you should take advantage of that because you'll find all these other markets and all these other, maybe I should call it clients within the market that you didn't know exist. All you got to do is just connect them. And you got all these tools that'll help you, from whatever your favorite social media thing is to more boring stuff like email and phone mail, right? So interesting.
And a big thing to consider here is a lot of the adage you hear about market size, and you talked about customer research right out of the gate. If you go and you decide to pay, I'm going to pay, $100,000 for a research report to tell me if my widget has a big enough market size, which is what the big companies do, right? Okay, here's this widget. We're going to spend a whole bunch of money. It can be hundreds of thousands, even in the millions of dollars, just researching whether the market size is big enough. Will people buy this, all this? That is business theory for large corporations. That is completely inapplicable to either small manufacturers or especially inapplicable to, new entrepreneurs, hardware startups, inventors. You don't need $100 million market for your product. You need a $500,000 per year worth of sales for your market, right? And that would be a massive business for you. And then what's interesting about this is you will then learn how to scale into the bigger and bigger markets. Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's not just a big versus small situation. This is actually, one person scratching the back of the other and vice versa with big corporate and small entrepreneurs. Most of our clients that have got into the bigger sales, 7-8 figure into sales, I shouldn't say most, almost all of them have got acquired. What is happening right now is big corporate is spending less money on internal research and development and more money on acquiring small, established, winning products. They're looking for the world to come up with the idea. And once the idea starts to gain some traction, then they either partner with them or buy them out or fund them or whatever else. And they scale up to be that massive organization. So it really helps in both directions. And it's really an amazing system that's happening right now. And all of this is backed by, like I said, a lot of those tools and a lot of these new technologies are coming out for hardware to actually be able to get to market quickly, to be able to be tested, to be validated, just like software is.
There's a whole nother train of thought you got me going there on about market research, but then the flip side of it, which is advertising and, how do you make the market want your thing, right? And all I'm getting at there is I really wish I could funnel that group of money, at least a major portion of it, back to the innovation side and say, okay, let's just try out new products, right? Let's not spend so much money convincing you to buy the widget I already manufacture, but rather let's go find the next startup and encourage innovation. And if it leads to acquisition, so be it. But the balance of money, it must be one of the hardest decisions in these bigger companies that senior executives have to make, which is, how much money do I spend going and acquiring what Kevin nurtured versus, advertising of the pickup truck you already know about and, go make more of them, right? So anyways, this has been an interesting discussion, Kevin. One last thing that I always ask guests in this past 18 months is what happened with you and the pandemic? You're in a different country than Thom and I are. You're just north of the border. How has that affected your business? And what did you learn along the way in coping with the pandemic?
Well, yeah, we've got 4 offices from coast to coast, right? Austin, Miami, San Francisco, and Toronto. So, luckily we were, as you can probably tell, I'm quite a bit of a tech nerd. So luckily we were all completely cloud-based and doing all that sort of stuff before this whole COVID thing was even a thing. We were one of the first companies on Zoom Phone when they first introduced that. We were one of their beta testers or company-wide on all of that. So for us,
is that another clue? An innovator chooses innovative technologies?
Absolutely.
Just an observation. Okay.
More efficient, faster, better. It's all part of it, right? And a big part of we're dealing with complex product development here. For everything's a new concept, right? So the better tools we can have to help our clients, the better products result. It's. I know I'm preaching to the choir here right now, but absolutely, I'm a big fan of using tech to best enable your best work. But for COVID, it wasn't a huge hit for us in terms of workflow. Everyone just worked from home instead of from the office. And now we're kind of back to a bit of a hybrid mode, which we'll probably stay at for the foreseeable future because it works well for us. But we did see, I would say, a downtick in especially early stage entrepreneurship. Where people were just more hoarding money. Yeah. But now all of that's changing because people say, okay, things are coming back and I don't want to be left behind. In fact, I want to get ahead of the next upswing, and that's, whether it's in a month or a year or 10 years, the point is they want to get their technology at least evolved and ready for when the market's ready for them, as opposed to hitting it, starting.
So you've seen the market start to pick back up then because people save, now they got money, right?
Yeah. Well, and they're trying to get ahead of it. Right. So people are trying to get ahead of it so that they know at some point there's going to be a big recovery. And we're not just talking about the stock market, but the overall economy, right? Total, hopefully another growth phase or growth boom. And people want to be in front of that as opposed to doing their R&D, because R&D takes time. So, it can take months or even into years. You don't want to be doing your R&D when the market takes off. You want to be doing it well in advance of that. And also there's a ton of since, like I mentioned in the earlier part of the show, there's a lot that's getting redeveloped anyways. A lot of that's irrelevant to what's going on in, the rest of the world, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a great invention, whether or not you're in the middle of a recession or in the middle of a boom, it could still be a very profitable small business, especially for an early stage company, or for a larger company, it could be a very good time to test that technology. Again, we talked about user research. I'm a big fan of user research through actual buyers. So you should do that, get some buyers, get your data ready so that you either, again, thumbs up, thumbs down, or change the product. Right?
Oh, Kevin, this has been fascinating. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And Thom, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. If somebody wanted to find out about you or about MAKO Design and Invent, how do they find you?
My favorite thing right now is I host a weekly show. It's the hardware industry's largest podcast called the Product Startup Podcast, productstartup.com. Or you can check us out if you're interested about product development. We've got 1,000 blog articles on our website and a ton of resources, white papers, all that. MAKOdesign.com, MAKO design.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever else.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened to the show. Join us here every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.